Hi, today I would like to present some work that we have been doing for quite some time, and this is about code idioms, and we can see how relevant they are in several situations. But the first one is to familiarize with a large code base. Now, when you need to start maintaining a code base that has been developed for 10, 20, 30 years, it's like you have to catch up on a TV series that is going on from the 90s. There are a lot of characters you're not familiar with, a lot of background, a lot of things that happen, and you're sort of lost. Now, if you are able to identify the typical code idioms and the most relevant code idioms in a code base, you can learn about those and help these to learn about the code base. So we created an automated system that identifies these code idioms. For example, in this case we are processing a code base written in Java. It's called Java Parser. It's open source, you can check it out. And let's ignore the title and the description, but what our approach produces, and our approach is algorithmic, so I know it's sort of old-fashioned, but we believe that there is value in producing solutions that you can refine, that are repeatable and do not consume as much energy as a city of 50,000 inhabitants to process a single code base. So these are things that are relevant to us. So we identify these repeated idioms, and we define a pseudocode representation. So this is basically the set of conditions that we check on the AST to find instances of this idiom. Okay, this is kind of technical and boring, but what is more relevant to a user are examples. So we identify inside the code base, for example, inside this file at this line, this example, then this other example, and this other example again. These idioms are similar, they are not the same, so the algorithm that identifies idioms knows how to ignore certain details. For example, this part doesn't appear in other instances, but the overall structure is. So we can find this example. Now in this case, this code base is about processing Java code, producing AST, and then processing that AST. So there are a lot of code that is repeated for the different kinds of nodes or constructs that we can have in a Java code base. Okay, so we get this, and then role for which we use LLM, because we wanted to follow all the trends for defining the name and the description, and that's it. So we identify the hidden, to find the title and the description. We think that LLM is a good fit. In that case, we feed into the LLM, the pseudocode representation, a large number of examples, more than the one that we show in this sort of documentation, and other internal details, so that we can guide it to provide a description. Now, the description could be slightly off, the title could be slightly off, and that will be sort of okay. So this is a situation where I think we can get value from LLM, and in case there is a problem, we're not controlling a nuclear reactor with this. If the description is slightly off, we can manually correct it. But with this system, we can generate plausible descriptions for a large number of idioms, in this case 50, in a matter of minutes. Okay, so this is an idiom, but yes, there are many more. For example, in this case, a series of conditional returns, a final variable assignment followed by null checks and calls to not equals. So we can see you know, several examples that are pretty similar, and so on. So we have this example, but one thing to consider is that because of our approach, we are able to apply the same logic to multiple languages. I will not bother you with the details, but the interesting thing is that we could apply the very same principle to identify code idioms on a RPG code base. In this case, we took a simple open source application and we processed it and found idioms. In this case, well, that is not the most exciting idioms, but is a sequence of call to command. Then we can this example that I think it's interesting because here we have a situation where we are concatenating stuff into a string, and each time we want to increase the length of a variable that we use to consider the length of the string. So we do this here, here, here. And again, I'm not familiar with this code base, but thanks to these idioms, I get to see certain. Or we have another idiom that has to do with using monitor and situation. So we can see again in different files, this one, structures that are very similar. So this is slightly different than finding code clones because we are not looking for structures that are exactly the same, but for structure that share some similarity. And so that we cannot apply the same techniques used for code clones. Code clones tend to be larger, tend to have less changes, while here we can have some structure that is the same and some content that is very different. They can be much smaller, and so they require specific techniques. But this is important because this helps us to familiarize with a code base, first of all, so that you can figure out what is going on. It's also useful in case you want to migrate such code base because you can find the most important idioms, the most important 50, 100, 200 idioms, plan for how to translate those idioms, and then you can writing transformation to transform that code automatically. And maybe you can, write down a plan. I want to identify 100 idioms, discover this proportion of the code, and I know to translate each of them. And so you progress following this plan. Start from the most relevant idiom to the second, the third, and so you can progress in a linear way. Makes migration less exciting, but more predictable. And, but this is also useful when you are designing a domain-specific language, because when you are designing a language, you may want to analyze how your users are using it, and if you find that they are writing certain idioms over and over again, that could indicate that there is a missing abstraction. So maybe you could introduce a new construct to facilitate the writing of the DSL code. So for a company like us specialized in language engineering, there are a lot of applications for the usage of code idioms, and I hope this was interesting to you. Thank you.